Hi from the Smithsonian American Art Museum in Washington, D.C. In this session, staff members Allie Burns, Becky Fulcher, and Peg Koetsch will tell you about our free Artful Connections online programs, demonstrate what you might experience if you participate in a connection with us, and tell you how to request a program. We'll also introduce a two-part activity that includes analyzing art elements in an artwork and understanding how the elements influence your interpretation of the artwork, as well as the artist's message. Finally, we'll explore the many teacher resources that we offer here at the Smithsonian American Art Museum that will help you integrate art into many different areas of the curriculum across a variety of subjects. Artful Connections programs are free video conference programs available from the Smithsonian American Art Museum, or SAM. SAM is one of 19 different museums, galleries, and the National Zoo that make up the Smithsonian Institution, the world's largest museum and research complex. And you can see a map of downtown Washington, D.C. With some of the landmarks noted, and the star is where we are located. So a little bit off the mall. You may not be familiar with us, but after this session, you will be. Each museum within the Smithsonian operates independently and has separate collections. So Artful Connections programs draw just from SAM's collection. So you won't see dinosaurs, airplanes, or the Angola prison tower in any of our programs. But what you will find is artworks from one of the largest and most inclusive collections of American art anywhere in the world. Artful Connections programs use digitized artworks from our vast collection of 45,000 artworks. They help us explore America's rich artistic and cultural history. The works we discuss reflect the American experience and global connections from colonial times to the present. So, what exactly is an Artful Connections virtual tour? They are free. They are interactive, conversation-driven, inquiry-based programs that explore topics related to heritage, history, and art. They're appropriate for grades 3 through 12. Specially trained volunteer presenters meet with your class for 40 to 60 minutes based on what works for your class schedule. Through questions that prompt students to look closely at artworks and also draw from prior knowledge, the volunteers help students hone key skills such as critical thinking, visual literacy, and analytical and 21st century skills. Program content can meet national standards, especially if you let us know which standards you'd like to address. We don't really focus on art making or periods in art history, choosing to concentrate instead on how to talk about an artwork and support claims for what you're seeing with evidence from the work. As a result, these lessons are great for social studies and ELA classrooms, as well as for art teachers who want to connect their classrooms to other subjects. In terms of what the conversation is like, they are live, as I said, and we can meet with you in a couple of different formats. We can meet with you with all of your students in a classroom with one computer and a projector in the front of the classroom. We can meet with you and your students if you're all online on individual devices, or we can meet with you in some hybrid format. So no matter what the coming school years bring in terms of where we are learning, whether you're an all online school or in person, we are flexible enough to meet you where you are, you and your students. So as you can see on the screen, we've got 11 different topics falling into 3 categories: looking at art, exploring history, and celebrating heritage. All are available for 5th grade and up, and many are also available for 3rd and 4th grade. The artworks and themes discussed are adapted based on the grade of your students, as well as any information you might give about themes that you'd like to focus on, artists you want your students to learn more about, or even where the program might fall in your unit. So we try and be flexible in terms of what we offer you. So you don't just get an off-the-shelf package deal. We tailor it based on you and your students' needs. And at this point, I am going to turn things over to Allie Burns, who is going to give you an example of what a conversation during one of our programs might be like.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the content of our Artful Connections lessons. And in an Artful Connections lesson, artworks are used as primary source documents to learn about the chosen history, art, or heritage topic, but also as tools to teach students close looking and visual analysis skills. So I'd like to show you two examples of content that's typical of an Artful Connections lesson so that you can get a feel for what your students' experience might be like during one. And I want to emphasize that our presenters all use different artworks. So what I'm showing you today may be used in a lesson, or it might not. You might get something that's totally different, but that has a lot of the same concepts behind it. So first, I would like to share an artwork that might be used in one of our Young America lessons. And I'll explain how I might teach this if I were a presenter leading an Artful Connections lesson. So first, I'd introduce this artwork and tell the students that this is something they might be familiar with already, because a lot of teachers are working with this artwork in their classroom, and that's okay. So just to assess what the level of knowledge is on this artwork. So I might ask first for them to look all over it from top to bottom, to drink in all the details with their eyes. And then I might ask them if they have seen it before, and if so, could they share with me what they've learned already so that I have a sense of what we're working with. And we can ask a student to summarize what they've learned about what it depicts, which is the Boston Massacre, one of the first violent conflicts in the American Revolutionary War. And then if they have seen it or if they haven't, I'm still going to ask the students to break down what's happening, even if they already know the story. So we might ask them, which side is being depicted as the villains of this scene? And how do you know? What are the clues here? What visual clues are we seeing that tells us that? I might ask them to look at the setting, what's around them, what can we learn about the place where this is taking place in? And then what are some words you might use to describe the different sides of this conflict? So after we've had some time to examine it together and discuss what we're looking at, the details of what we're seeing, then I will share more background information. So that this is a print that was made by Paul Revere after the Boston Massacre, and I can explain that if the students are not familiar with that yet. And I'll share some information about the reality of what occurred in this event, which is that it wasn't this orderly, that while the British troops did fire on and murder colonists, the colonists were also throwing rocks and being provocative and unruly before this, and that the British didn't line up, intending to shoot the way that they're shown here, so that there's some details that are being changed. And then I will ask the students, why might Revere have changed those details based on, the specifics of what we're looking at and the story that I've told? Why do they think he might have changed those details? And there's one interesting detail that we like to point out. So there's one woman who is depicted in this print, but she's not a focus of the scene here. She's very much sort of cloistered, sheltered in the back in the shadows. And there were indeed women present at this event. And in fact, one of the eyewitnesses was a woman who was only steps away from the soldiers at the event and was a crucial, she was one of the most important testimonies at the trial of these soldiers. So sharing this detail helps contextualize for students how not everything is accurate in this story. And I might wrap up by asking them to summarize what the story is telling. So just what's his version of these events, and do we think it's telling it effectively? So these are just some of the questions we might ask, maybe not every single one of them, but a very interactive engagement with this work of art. So then we might show a second artwork that's actually telling the same, it's focusing on the same subject, but this is a painting by an artist named William H. Johnson, and it's made in 1945, so a very different time period that this was made in. So I'll ask the same questions, ask the students to look all over this artwork and drink in the details. And I'll ask them simply, what's going on here? And they'll probably be able to tell right away that we're looking at the same thing. And I'll ask them to share some differences and some similarities So students will usually talk about the color and the style, but also about the people. So they'll often mention right away that there are more women in this artwork, and we can talk about how they're in the same pose as that first artwork. They'll identify the man on the ground as a Black man. They'll discuss that his race is not represented in Paul Revere's artwork. We might talk about the background. They might notice that the silhouette of the building is the same, or that it's showing a different point in the conflict. So we're not seeing the soldiers actively firing yet. And so after we've discussed this, I'll introduce what the identity of that man on the ground is, and that this is showing a man named Crispus Attucks, who is believed to be the first American casualty of the Revolutionary War, who we think was of Wampanoag and African descent. And so this is a really important historic figure that not everybody necessarily learns about in class. I know I didn't as a child. And so this artwork is a way to introduce students to this figure if they might not know about him, or to examine his importance if they do. So we can talk about why he's so central to this artwork. Some students identify that his pose is in a cross, and if you think that's appropriate to discuss with your students, we could talk about how that's a sacrificial symbol for many people. And so then I'll ask the same question of what story is this artwork telling? So in our first artwork, maybe we're telling a positive story in favor of the colonists for Paul Revere's own reasons. And here we're telling a story that's focused more on the actual civilians who were involved. And so the artist who made this, William H. Johnson, was an African-American man, and he wanted to tell the story of this figure who wasn't necessarily well known, especially when he made it in the 40s. And so by looking at the clues of the artwork, students can come to that conclusion on their own. And this is an example of how we can use artworks in multiple ways. So this is a pairing that we use a lot in our Young America lessons, but we might also use this in an African-American artist's heritage lesson to talk about the important story it's telling about Black history. So the second example I wanted to share is an artwork that we might use also in two different lessons. And that is, the two lessons might be our To See is to Think topic, which is more focused on visual thinking, looking at art together and art elements. And the other topic might be our Latin American heritage topic. So for this artwork, I've put two details of it on the side. I might ask students to look all over it first, just like with the first one, to break it down with their eyes. And then I might lead an exercise, a modified version of an exercise called Step Inside. So this is a little bit of a perspective taking exercise. And I would ask students to first try to step inside one of the girls on the roof. So the girl in red, and show them the detail of the girl in red. And I ask them to share with me what they think she might perceive. So what is she sensing around her? So that helps them look at the details of the artwork more closely. And then ask them, after we've done that, what do you think she might care about? So we're thinking more about her behavior, her pose, her location. So after we've talked about her environment, now we're thinking about what do we think this girl might be thinking inside her head about herself and her goals. And then I'll ask them the same questions about the woman in yellow. So if we step inside that woman, what are we perceiving? And students will share observations about the interior of this house. And then what do we think she might care about? So often students will talk about valuing cleanliness, valuing religion because of the cross on the wall. She has beautiful beauty items on the dresser behind her. Sometimes they'll talk about valuing her appearance. But we're breaking down two different people and their different values. And then I'll ask them about the relationships. Once we've talked about the individuals, what do we think their relationship might be between them? And what I love about teaching this artwork is that we have a quote from the artist who made this and about this artwork. And we always love to share videos or quotes from artists whenever we can so that students can hear directly from them. And this artist's name is Carmen Lomas Garza. She is a Chicana artist, a Mexican-American artist who grew up in South Texas. And her art is often very autobiographical, telling the story of her heritage and her upbringing. So she said about this artwork, "My sister and I would hide there on the roof. And we also talked a lot about what it would be like to be an artist in the future because both of us wanted to be. And I dedicated this painting to my mother because she also wanted to be an artist. She gave us that vision of being an artist. That's her making the bed up for us. So after I've shared that quote, I'll ask students, what does that add to your understanding of this relationship about what the mother has done for her children? And I'll often also share the title of the artwork at this point, which is Camas para Sueños, which means beds for dreams. And I think that waiting until this point to share that title helps students think for themselves about the relationship between the mother and the children, that by caring for the home, she's supporting their dreams. So it's fun to hold that detail back until later on. But so this is an example of how we're both able to break down this artwork to talk about the familial relationship and how that was a big part of her, of Carmen Lomas Garza's immigrant upbringing, a huge part of her support system as she was able to thrive as an immigrant in this country, or as a first generation American on her father's side in this country. And it's also an example of how we can dive into the artwork and look closely at the formal details of it. So we can break down the line and the shape and the color of the artwork when we're talking more about the details of what we're looking at, or we can emphasize that story of the family connection more if we're talking about this in a Latin American artist's lesson. And I just wanted to share one more artwork by this artist that we might use in a Latin American artist's lesson. And so this is an example of one of Carmen Lomas Garza's artworks that's very focused on her family and her heritage. And this is a painting showing a tamale making party. So a family gathered together to make tamales together. And so, of course, I love to ask students to break down what they're looking at first, the colors and the mood, and what kind of people they're looking at. So what are the ages of the people, and what do we think their relationships might be, and why? And then this is just a really great artwork for talking about elements of Mexican American culture and heritage. So for example, there is a molcajete, which is a special kind of mortar and pestle on the counter. There's flamenco dancers on the calendar behind them. We have religious imagery, because Catholicism was a big part of her personal heritage as a Mexican American, as well as all of these incredible details of just physically how you make a tamale. So every step of this process is shown in the painting, and it can be fun to ask students to break down, how do you think the tamale is made based on what we're looking at? So this is another example of an artwork by the same artist that we can use to both help students look at the details in the work and delve deeply into the details of the content, so the Latin American heritage here. So I hope these two examples helped showcase for you how we use artworks in Artful Connections lessons to prompt students to look closely and critically at art, and to examine artworks for evidence, so to use them as texts, to read them as texts, but also how we're linking artworks back to that content area, so the chosen subject or curricular area that you selected. So we're doing both at the same time, giving them that curricular content and giving them those looking skills. Back to Becky.
Hi there. So now that you've seen these fantastic examples that Allie has shared with you, you want one or more of these programs in your classroom, right? Did I mention that they are free? Well, it is very easy to request these programs. You can go to our website. You can see the URL there on the screen. We've got all the information there that you need, including descriptions of all 11 topics, which grades they're available for, potential national standards that the programs can be linked to, and an easy black button with each topic that will allow you to request the various topics. We'll send you over to the Center for Interactive Learning and Collaboration website, where you actually put your requests in. A few tips to think about for each class or group that you would like to meet with us. Think about potential dates, the time of day that you want to start and stop. We do schedule based on your availability, not on ours, and so we can work with you throughout your day. We can meet with multiple classes at a time, but we do prefer to meet with a single class at a time. These aren't assembly style programs, so we want to talk with each class, and you can put in requests for as many classes as you would like to meet with us. Give us about 3 weeks notice more if for best availability. And we hope that we will be able to see you in the future. But that is not where all of the fantastic resources from the Smithsonian American Art Museum end. And now I'm turning it over to Peg Koetsch, who's going to give you an activity that you can take and use in your classroom tomorrow if you would like.
So before revealing the next artwork, let me explain. The activity you're about to do is if you were a student participating in an Artful Connections video conference. And this activity has two parts. The first part helps you discover what the artist is trying to communicate by using art elements like line, shape, color. That's their vocabulary. I'm going to hold off on the second part, which guides you through an interpretation of the artwork until we do this formal analysis. And this is going to parallel what we would do with students of any age who are eager to jump into interpretation before doing a thorough observation. So to get ready, grab a piece of paper, something to draw with, either a pencil or a pen. I want you to place your paper horizontally like you see this blue rectangle. I'm going to give you 4 different instructions, and you're going to draw quick responses to each of them, all on the same sheet of paper. Now, there's no right or wrong here. You don't need any prior art experience. I'm going to tell you the instructions with a slight pause in between, but if I was doing this with your students, I would give them about a minute to do each. So if you would actually like to do the activity as we go along, I suggest you pause the video, have time to do the drawing, and then start it back up again for the next instruction. If I was doing this with your students, I would give them like less than a minute to respond to each of the instructions. All right, so when I reveal this artwork, the first thing I want you to do is notice where your eye goes. And wherever it goes, whatever you spot first, imagine drawing a simple circle around that and place it on your paper approximately where it is in the painting. You're going to treat your paper as if it's the whole size of that painting. So you're going to place that circle, ellipse, whatever you outline it with, on the paper, make it the same size as what you see in the original. All right, ready? Where does your eye go first? Where is your eye taken first? Draw a circle around that, place it on your paper approximately where it is in the painting. Second instruction. How does your eye move as it goes from the first thing you notice around the rest of the painting? I want you to draw a line that represents the path that your eye follows. And if you want to, you can put arrows on it indicating the direction in which your eye moves. You may not go to every part of it, as Allie had asked you to look at the piece from left to right, top to bottom, every detail. You may just be skimming it right now to take in the whole thing. Third instruction. Imagine you're putting glasses on and you're looking at this only seeing geometric shapes, whether it be circles, squares, triangles, rectangles, trapezoids. I want you to divide this up as if it's a geometric puzzle. Outline where you see rectangles, where you see triangles, circles. They could be within inside of each other, or they could cover a major part of the painting. Fourth instruction. And when I do this, sometimes it helps for me to squint my eyes. You're going to take this and look at it as if it's only black, gray, and white. I want you to take your pencil and darken in those darkest areas. Again, just work in large areas. Lightly shade in the gray areas. Leave the lightest areas the color of the paper. So take a minute to do all that. And then I want you to step back and think about the very first place your eye went. Why do you think your eye went there first? And what you're looking at is a map that follows how the artist manipulated your eyes using just those elements that you were examining. If you're doing this with a group or students in a class, I would suggest that they share their map with their neighbor and ask what they saw first and how their eye moved around the piece. Again, there's no right or wrong here. It's just becoming conscious of how an artist is controlling the way you look at this piece. And then I want you to think about how much you've learned without me telling you even the artist's name, excuse me, or the title of this piece, or even about the subject matter. Now, in case you think your students might need guidance in doing this, I've added animation. I circled what my eye went to first, drew a path of how it went around the rest of the painting. I then circled those or outlined those geometric shapes. And then I colored in the darkest areas and shaded in the gray areas. And my reasoning for seeing that person first has a combination, a reason of all these things coming together. It's partly its location, partly its scale. I know my eye is attracted to diagonals and also his prominence in this piece, but the way he stands out in contrast to the other colors. So listen to the reasoning that your own mind is making, but also your students. Now, once we've built up your understanding of these compositional elements, we're going to transition to how they influence the way you interpret this piece and the message the artist is trying to communicate. So again, I'd ask you to share with your neighbor, what do you see in this painting? Name specific things that you see that exist there. So you might notice that wall that divides it in the middle. You might notice the color of the people on the left versus the color of the people on the right. You might notice all the detail and additional accessories that are in the left compared to the right. As you're looking, I'd provide more background information. This painting is done by an artist named Jacob Lawrence. He called it Bar and Grill. It was painted in 1941. And as I give you more information, I want you to think about how you would respond to this question. How does this painting communicate the idea of separate but not equal? So Jacob Lawrence, like many African American artists, made it his mission to capture the daily lives and experiences of African Americans. He was born in 1917 and raised in the North. His parents separated, and then he moved with his mother and siblings, even sometimes spending time in a foster home before they settled in New York City. Although his early life was not easy, when he traveled in 1941 on his honeymoon to New Orleans, that's the first time he experienced segregation. During this time, the South was the point of origin for many African Americans to move north because of all the segregation, because of having to stay in the back of a bus, because of having to drink from different water fountains. His mother, Lawrence's mother, had come from Virginia and his father from South Carolina. But even as Lawrence remarked, in 1941, if you weren't born in the South, your parents were. And your life had a whole Southern flavor. It wasn't an alien experience to you, even if you had never been there. But still, he painted this painting when he realized the difference between his life in the South and what he had grown up with in the North. Now think about what emotions you're getting from this piece, not only from looking at it with those aesthetic elements, but also the background information I just shared with you. Our curator believes that Lawrence is showing anger. Even though he used the interior of cafe, that wall is physically dividing it into two distinct realms. One is occupied by whites on the left, on the right by blacks. And if you look at that amount of space that the bar occupies, the counter of the bar, it's almost as if it's thrusting you and making you, the viewer, separate, along with the bartender, from the patrons that are there. He wants to compress that space with the way he painted the line of the ceiling and the walls, and adding that fan that indicates the status of what you can experience if you're white or versus Black. The number of figures on each side of the room also reflect the white-Black ratio of city residents in New Orleans at that time. So let's go back to that question I asked in the beginning. How does this painting communicate the idea of separate but not equal? Give yourself a chance to think about that. Give your students a chance to discuss it with each other and share it out. We would walk them through this activity, as I just did with you, during an Artful Connections conference, video conference. So in summary, this kind of analysis, being careful about looking at aesthetic elements and how they are integrated with historical context, it helps establish a foundation for students to use when constructively interpreting and critiquing an artwork or any type of media. So now I'm going to switch and I'm going to put on my other hat, which is the program coordinator for REACH, Rural Engagement in Art, Culture, and History. This is a new initiative Sam is using to help increase your teaching tools and strengthen your students' learning, especially if you are in a rural area. It consists of various outreach programs like Allie and Becky have been discussing, but at the same time, we want to know what your needs are. We want to know if our resources, the ones that we currently have, and you're about to learn a lot more, can help serve your academic and curriculum needs. And if not, what is it that we could help create in conjunction with you to help meet your curriculum goals? So the first level is introducing you to the resources like we're doing today. And the second level is piloting with you any adaptations that might meet your unique requests. And then the third level is being able to see, again, if there's anything new that we can create to help meet your needs. So if you're in a rural location and you are interested in delving deeper into what Sam can supply and help work with you to collaborate and integrate the arts into teaching your curriculum, please feel free to contact me at the email that you see above. Back over to my colleagues.
We've already introduced you to a number of resources, including Artful Connections programs and all of the programming that, the activity that Peg has shown you. But our resources don't end there. We have a number of other free resources available on our website, and I'm going to walk you through just a small selection of them. I really encourage you to go to our website and check out all of them. But in order to give you a taste, let's take a quick tour through some of the other activities that will help reach a lot of different curricular areas. So let's say that you are interested in teaching historical perspective taking. We have a lesson using the artwork of Bill Traylor, who was a man born into enslavement, who lived to see the beginnings of the civil rights era. He reflected his life experience in his art. And this is available on our website. You need to tackle critical thinking. Use this lesson that we've developed that uses craft to examine and develop critical thinking skills. You can then extend those thinking skills across the curriculum into many different subjects. Explore STEAM topics such as art, conservation, and chemistry, design thinking, ecosystems, and food webs. So we cover science through art as well. Let's say you need to find an activity for some SEL work that you and your students are wanting to do. We have a toolkit that can help you journal using art that will help students connect to themselves and their emotions in both English and Spanish. We have a couple of microsites that can help you dig more deeply into cross-curricular themes. American Experience in the Classroom, it helps you and your students investigate paired artworks that bring to life key moments in our nation's history. You can explore different thematic threads that connect artworks across historical areas. And there's all kinds of activities. There's a great timeline that you can see where different historical moments and different artworks match up. So that's great help for social studies classrooms. Smithsonian Learning Lab is a fantastic free interactive platform. It can help you connect to millions of authentic digital resources, not just from SAM, but actually from across the Smithsonian. You can create content through Learning Lab. You can share in Smithsonian's expansive community of knowledge and learning. You can create your own customizable teaching resources, or you can see resources that have been created by museum staff, as well as teachers such as yourselves. This next slide shows a sample learning lab that SAM staff created that include both SAM artworks and artifacts from across the Smithsonian to help your students learn about the solar system. And it doesn't stop there. We've got artist videos, recordings of living artists talking about their works in the SAM collection, as well as their approaches to creating artworks, how their art intersects with current events, for example, and the environment, identity, themes like that. We have professional development opportunities. We offer in person in Washington, D.C., but we also offer online professional development. We've got past sessions that are archived. We even have ongoing summer opportunities that are available online as well. You can even find additional activities for art making at home if you've got students that you want to empower to create art at home. Finally, we can connect you to images of artifacts from across the Smithsonian, in addition to the full catalog of digitized artworks in the SAM collection, over 45,000 of them. And I think we've got a brief image of that on the next slide. So we have a ton of resources for you, but don't get overwhelmed. The first place to stop is our website. You can visit the URL that you see there in front of you. That will get you into the education section, poke around, find what you need. And if you can't find what you need, feel free to get in contact with any of the three of us with what you're looking for. We will point you in the right direction. Ask questions about REACH, our rural initiative from PEG. Get in touch with me about any questions that you might have related to Artful Connections scheduling. Allie Burns can help you with content for Artful Connections. We are so happy to help connect you to resources that will empower you to incorporate art into your classroom in all different sections. And we thank you for joining us today and hope that you have a great day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.